Mastering Case Frameworks. I'm Claire, and this is my lovely co-host, Ben. As part of Consulting Week, I know many people have been here, so it's great to see you all again, hopefully, and to meet some new faces. So really excited to have you for the next hour and to hopefully be as helpful as possible. As I mentioned, this is part of Leland's broader Consulting Week. We're actually on the tail end of it. I know some of you have been sticking with us since Tuesday when Ben and I were on a panel talking about kicking off Consulting Week. It's an amazing curriculum throughout Wednesday. And then Thursday, I saw Ben in the chat. Thursday, you've got plenty of time. You've got 2 more opportunities with the office hours with the former hiring managers. And then you've got how I landed my McKinsey offer in 2 weeks. So if you're in it for the rest of the day, you've got some really great programming, but broadly, this is the tail end of an amazing, amazing week that Leland has thrown and has been a really great opportunity to get your feet wet and be part of Consulting Week. So today, what are we going to do? We'll kick it off with a quick welcome and introductions, especially if you haven't already interacted with me and Ben at one of our many, many Leland events. We'll just make sure that everyone gets to know us. Then we're going to go into a brief overview of like the core framework fundamentals, what's important, what you should keep in mind as you start to framework and work through these cases. And then we're going to do a very fun live demo. As Ben said, you get to see me potentially dunk on him, depending on how good his frameworks are. You might do a great job though. And then we'll even have an opportunity for a volunteer to help and to raise their hand and to join us and to get some real case practice with 2 lovely coaches, if I might add. And then finally, with any remaining time, we'll do a wrap-up Q&A, and then we'll send you on your way to the rest of Consulting Week. But thank you again. Super excited to have you. And with that, let's kick off. So you've already been hearing me talk a lot, but I'm Claire. I am a current Hennessy Scholar, and I'm getting my MBA and MA in Education at Stanford GSB. I started as a consultant as early as being an intern. I was at Bain. I then came back full time and spent a lot of time part of campus recruiting and on the broader recruiting team. There's never been a case I've never loved. I loved consulting and then headed my way into PE and VC before doing some brand work at Nike this summer. That's a bit about me. Ben?
What's up, guys? Great to meet everybody. I've been on Leland for a couple of years now, and met Claire this past year, and she's been phenomenal to do a bunch of this stuff with. In terms of me, if anyone's from the Queens area, New York, shout out. I went to WashU for undergrad, loved every minute of it, and then got to start at McKinsey afterwards. But I also feel like I got a number of really good touch points, and frankly, I didn't realize the value of a lot of the stuff that I was even doing sometimes at McKinsey until later. And some of that was like running, Midwest recruiting, actually going back to my alma mater, and then helping find those next couple of classes of folks to join the firm, and complemented that with also just real live interviews and getting real case reps as well with a lot of people and helping them build the toolkit that you need, because it's versatile and it's dynamic and it requires practice. So after that, went to the mayor's office in Chicago, got my MBA from GSB as well. And I've done a smattering of things since, but ready to dive in. Yes, Danasia, go Knicks. If you're rooting for the Celtics, I feel absolutely zero sympathy for you, and wishing you ever more pain. So that's a little about me. Claire, back to you.
Amazing. Thanks for that. And congrats on the sports.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just kick off. Let's go into some fundamentals on frameworking before we dive into the live demo. I know many of you have probably been casing for a while. If you have been casing for a while, some of you might have never done a case before. So let's level set. Let's all get up to date. But when you think about a case interview, the framework is basically like the most important part. It's the thing that will kick it off. So let's make sure that we really learn that muscle and go from there. So to start by myth busting some things. Generally, there are a couple main things that you can do that will help you feel better. So number one, there's a myth that you need to memorize every single framework and that it's just about regurgitation. That's not true. Our advice here is not to memorize frameworks. Although it's important to take track of and be very aware of what frameworks are available, right? Know what profitability is, know how you might approach a certain market entry case. It's important to find common patterns in areas that you like. And then when you get to the case and when it's time to make a framework, nothing beats careful listening and critical thinking, hearing what you're being asked, hearing the details of the case, and using the things that you've practiced and learned to really frame it in a unique and specific way to that case. Which leads us to number 2, which is all about offering nuance. These cases have so many different layers to them. We're testing skills across the board, analytical, people skills, thinking skills. And so while these cases have all of these little wrinkles and different details, you need to make sure that you're nuanced about it and that you're figuring out what matters, what doesn't, and providing a layer of nuance that will be supportive as you work through the case. And then third, it's all about practice. Practice structuring. Nothing's going to replace those live practices. Some people fall into this trap of, I can read a million cases, I can read all the books, I can watch all the YouTube videos, but if you aren't putting it into practice and doing it live and messing up sometimes and fixing it, you're not going to get that muscle memory you need to day of the case absolutely crush it. And so the way you can do that is by getting your reps in, getting the bulk up, and then just keep going and learning from each mistake or each positive and seeing how to go from there. Next, the most important thing to do is to focus your framework.
Hey, Claire, can I actually have you flip back to the last slide real quick? Because I want to mention something. We're going to be doing kind of a version of this later, but I think there's a small little tool, kind of hinted on the bottom right here. I personally, I did philosophy, neuroscience primarily in undergrad. I didn't know what the hell this stuff was. And so frameworks to me were actually the most amorphous part of casing and the piece that I struggled the most with. Not because that's not how my brain can't do this stuff, but because the structuring and all of the little things about having to do it in such a short time constraint, that personally felt to me like a tough thing to do to mentally corral all your ideas. So what I started doing actually was working with my case buddy at the time. And he and I would do these things called case starts, where we would just do the framework part of the case. We would do it live in person, just like anything else. But we would basically do 5 or 6 of these until we were tired, basically. And I think that really helped us hone the skill of frameworking, and we were getting consistent feedback on the structuring. So rather than always feeling like you have to do an entire case end to end, sometimes you can do a few of these easier reps to get your feet wet.
That's such a good point. And I think when we think about different skills, sometimes people drill their math, people will drill other parts. Drilling your frameworks in that mindset that Ben just said is crucial and is super helpful. For me, I also struggled with frameworks up front because I was just so overwhelmed. I didn't have a business background. So a lot of this wasn't intuitive to me. But because I practiced frameworks and I practiced listening and being really engaged with the problems, I consistently got feedback that my frameworks were my strongest part because I would really focus on it because I needed to make sense of the problem before I could tackle the next step or the next thing. I really, really had to drill in. And so totally agree. Find a case partner, find a coach, and start to practice those case starts because they're super crucial and will get you on the right foot to go ahead. So the next one is focus. So like we said, every piece of your framework should target the main question. Most cases will end, and you'll see as we practice, it'll be like the company wants to know if this is a good idea or not, or something of that sort. Make sure you identify what the question is, and then make your entire framework specifically around that question. So to go through that, that means that every single bucket that you're frameworking should be like a test. So it's not a test of your ability or your skills, but it's more of, in order to prove a hypothesis, each bucket should get you closer to whether or not you are cracking the case. And so think of it as approaching bucket creation and brainstorming with the detective's mindset, which we love to say. Figure out what you need to rule out, what information you need to get to decide whether or not you know the answer to the case. Secondly, it's important to be hypothesis driven within it. You're not going to have all the information right away. You're not going to know the answer to the case, maybe even till the end. But if you have a working hypothesis throughout the case, whether that's initially, I think that this is probably a good idea or not, you can go through and keep thinking about it with every bucket is seeing whether or not it works or feeds into your hypothesis. And you keep driving back to that big idea. So it keeps you structured and it keeps you right on track. This will come in later, post framework, when you're doing something like looking at a weird graph or doing some math. being able to link that back to the hypothesis that you create in your framework is going to allow you to stay structured, to stay on track when things get confusing, and to keep driving towards an answer that will show how good you are at casing. And then thirdly, when you're actually presenting that framework, right? So like I actually mocked this up. It's really ugly, so ignore me. But I will take my notes here. I'll then put like what the key question was, right? So should we enter this market? I'll put it and I'll circle it so I never lose what the question is. And then I'll literally write out the different buckets that I want to test. So this might be market size. This might be competition. This might be this. And then for each one, I say, these are my 3 buckets. And then I explain some rationale why each of these buckets matters so that the case interviewer is following along with you and they understand how logical you are, because it's not necessarily about getting the right buckets, but it's getting the logical buckets that make sense to answer the case and to figure out what your hypothesis is and to solve it towards the end. Ben?
Yes.
Thoughts?
Anything else I want to add here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think one thing a lot of people do wrong in this is they sort of think they think a little bit too separated when they're thinking about their case, where they have their framework up front, then they got their exhibits and their analysis, and then they've got their recommendation, and they sort of compartmentalize those buckets of the case. One of the best things that I think strong case performers do, and I think Claire is at least hinting at that, is they tie everything back. And so when you get a new exhibit, you're thinking to yourself, not just what are the insights for this exhibit, but how does it bear on the original question? Are we now further or closer to a particular conclusion as a result of having now analyzed, exhibit XYZ? And you do that with each piece of new information that you get. And I think that's a lot of what, case folks call things like sense making, or at least like tieback, stuff like that.
Such a great point. Like exactly what I was thinking, and we can go over this a little bit more. I see a question in the chat, but like what I do, I call this my Bible. And I literally will make this, and this will be like my framework. My hypothesis might go right here. The key question is the one here. And then I will sit this on my desk in clear view. And each new part of the case, let's say I'm now doing a math question, I'll start a new piece of paper, and anything relevant to it, I will literally go, oh, so the market's growing at 25%. I'll then take it, go back to my Bible, and put that answer on my sheet, so that at the end of the case, the only thing that matters is my hypothesis, is my framing, and is the way that I'm going about the case. It helps when it gets tricky, because you can always just go, what did I say I was going to do next? Oh, the market. And then you can keep going without feeling lost.
That's such a good point, Claire. And I would also add that this is a largely intellectual and conversational exercise, but cannot emphasize enough paper management. I was so bad at this, guys. I would just write a bunch of stuff, and all of a sudden, I have 43 ideas. And if I actually look at the piece of paper in front of me, if it wasn't me and I hadn't just written that, I probably couldn't even tell you what I wrote 3 weeks later. So remember also that your interviewer sometimes will ask for or take the piece of paper as almost like a physical barometer of your ability to organize. You can also flip back to it later. Some of the best casers that I saw, what they would do is they'd have their framework, and as they got insights from or new information, they'd actually add a bullet to their framework, right? Exactly. They would go back to it. Yeah, cool.
Or I would be like, oh, you tell me that the market's bad. I'd be like, well, that's like a -1. I would just add stuff so it's clear that I'm engaging with it as a hypothesis. We'll see that when Ben tries to do it. So let's see how he does. And then just to wrap this up, as much as casing matters about being logical, being structured, making a really good framework, the communication and the way in which you are able to create a good environment with your interviewer is crucial. You could have the perfect structure, but it's so important to communicate. So the way we do that is by first asking questions. You're going to get either a lot or a little information up front. And the first thing that you're allowed to do is ask some clarifying questions. Generally, it's important to make sure you're grasping it. So you might read back the case, right? If I give it to you, I'm like, what I'm hearing is this. Is that correct? And then if you don't understand a term, you're not sure about something, for example, you've never been to this place or you don't understand how rubber is made, it's okay to say, do you mind just walking me through that process so I make sure we're on the same page? Or I've had a case that was we are a drug manufacturer. Pretty important to know what drugs we manufacture. So it's important to ask questions to understand. The next is thinking about casing as a partnership, right? You're going to be working with an interviewer, and it should not feel like a test. It should feel like you are working together on a case team to solve a problem. So you want to make sure that you are able to like communicate well, show them that you're in it together and that you're thinking about this well, because if you open them up right away, they'll be more helpful. And maybe when things are a little difficult, they might give you a little bit more steer and they'll be really helpful. So presenting your framework in a really conversational way is important. And then step 3 is avoid my experience assumptions. So every single thing that you need to do to be able to solve the case is in the case. If you have this weird random knowledge of the thing that they're talking about, that might lead you astray. So try to focus on what you're hearing, what you're seeing. And if you have assumptions, feel free to verify those with the interviewer. So be like, oh, I actually am pretty, like, I know this. Is this right to assume? And you can double check it, but generalize, you're trying to use the case and everything inside of it to get what you need to get. And you'll see that when Ben gets to do amazing little frameworks. Anything else to add, Ben, before we dive in there?
No, let's go for it.
Amazing. So we're going to do some live demos. I'm going to be the case interviewer and have Ben, I'm going to tell him the case, and then Ben's going to structure and present to us a framework. I want everyone to think of what we just went through in mind and be ready to give feedback, think about what he's doing right, what he's doing wrong, and we'll discuss each one. But with that, Ben, are you ready?
I'm nervous, guys.
You should be. Just kidding. You shouldn't.
Okay. Let's do it. Let's do
Amazing.
it.
So, number 1, our client is the general manager of the Evanston Eagles, Evanston's professional basketball team. It's halfway through the season, and the Eagles star player, Trip Richmond, suffered a serious injury in last night's game. Specifically, Richmond's left ankle buckled as he landed after collecting a rebound. Although the team physician initially suspected a sprained ankle, this morning's MRI delivered a more concerning diagnosis. Richmond tore his peroneus longus, a lateral ankle tendon. Richmond's presence on the court is essential to the team's success, so his injury puts the team at risk of missing the playoffs. In collaboration with medical staff, our task is to address Richmond's injury in the way that best allows the team to make the postseason. Additionally, the general manager is curious about the financial impact of the decision we recommend, as attendance and fan engagement generated when Richmond plays is substantial. With half of the 80-game regular season remaining, how should the Eagles react to Richmond's injury?
Okay. So do you mind if I just run a few things back by you just so we're on the same page? Does that work?
100%.
Okay, super. So we are a more or less a basketball team. I believe you mentioned the Eagles. Sounds like we've got 2 main goals, if I'm hearing that right. The first is just simply making the playoffs in lieu of this major injury, and potentially the financial, assessing the financial downside or possible other options that we have. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, and we actually, exactly in the order you said it, the first goal is to make the postseason, and then the second one is to make sure we minimize that.
Okay. And I am not, I'm familiar with things like an ACL or, a torn like labrum or something. Like, can you elaborate at all on this injury or like do you have any sense of the severity? It doesn't sound good. Yeah,
no, it sounds scary, but it's actually okay. These tears are relatively uncommon, but the medical staff has evaluated Richmond and are confident that he'll eventually return to play at full strength. How quickly he is able to do that, though, is uncertain and will largely depend on the chosen medical treatment that we go with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And can I ask on the chosen medical treatment that you go with, is it a little bit premature to be asking you about those kinds of options just yet? Or do you have any information there?
We do, but let's maybe hold off on that first. I think we just want to figure out how to think about it before we dive into those specifics.
Got it. And in the same way we might look at any sort of organization's like capacity to achieve its goals, can we get a sense of like how the Eagles are doing and potentially like how the rest of their team looks with, aside from this one player?
Yeah, so we're like the best team in the league. We're obsessed. But generally, we're seen as like the front runner far and away with Richmond. We're a pretty strong team. I think we haven't gotten a full look at what the team looks like without it. So that might be something to consider. But we are an odds-on favorite out and away. We really need to figure out how much of an impact Richmond's going to have.
Okay. One last quick question. I think you mentioned that this was a professional team. Is this can we assume this is like kind of professional in the same way that like, the NBA or the MLB or something like that is professional, or is it more like college?
Professional. Yep. Exactly.
Professional. Okay. I think I've got, this is a unique situation. I think I've got just about everything I need. Do you mind if I take just 2 minutes or so to draft things out?
Go ahead.
All right.
As he works, if anyone has any immediate thoughts on how he's doing, anyone wants to gas him up in the chat, feel free to put some thoughts in. The case will generally be spoken. So yeah, like he's very lucky he gets to see this for as long as he does. But imagine getting all of that information said to you, which is why it's really important to clarify and go, just so I'm understanding, like, because there might be specifically, if there's numbers, it's good to just make sure you're aware of them.
For what it's worth, guys, also, this is all I wrote after the prompt. That's it.
Okay, well, that's on you.
Just because I was listening a little too hard. Give me 30 more seconds and then I'll have something for you.
Take your time. I'm going to yap over you though.
Okay.
Also, if anyone wants to feel bad for me, this is particularly triggering because I just sprained my own ankle. In case anyone was wondering.
With that, I think I have a wonderful framework for you, if that's all right.
Let's do it.
Okay. Given this is at least from my experience, like more of a non-traditional business situation, I took my structure and in kind of trying to achieve this two-pronged goal, we've got, the overarching goal, we want to figure out our options for making the postseason. This is a storied franchise and they don't want to have such a down year. And that will obviously be contingent on this, our star player status. But that seems like goal one. Goal two is what are the financial consequences of this, and how do we, either mitigate it or at least, explore other options. So I split my structure into three parts, and I did it based on time, which I think in this case might lend itself well to a very complicated injury situation. So the three main categories I have are just the day one immediate impact. Two is call it like the mid game or something, thinking about like game theory or multi-team response. And then the third piece is the long-term, medium-term and long-term financial impact of this. Since it sounds to me like we may have a number of different scenarios that we need to evaluate, but ultimately there's going to be a range of different changes to our financial structure that we have to consider. Starting from there, does that sound like a normal structure? Does that make sense?
Yeah, talk me through it though. So just again, so the long term is what? When does the long term happen? What are the boxes again?
I'm thinking about the day one impact, meaning like injury. How do we manage it? How do we deal with the situation? How do we ameliorate all parties and at least come up with some sort of game plan to go forward from day zero, day one? Two is a little bit more around like, maybe, and in fact, maybe it's just worth getting into the buckets themselves just to explain.
Yeah.
Day one impact, I'm thinking things like, okay, literal individual player management. We have our star players injured. How do we make sure that person gets the best care possible? And at least is evaluated by multiple physicians, has opinions, and we actually start to get those options, and they're pixelated in higher definition for us. So it's not just a hypothetical. Within this day one impact as well, we need to make some sort of statement. Likely, we need to address the media. We at least need to bring them in on this because everyone's going to see our star players not playing, and they're going to want information. So, how do we think about the media? How do we think about overarching messaging? Third, I would just say within this bucket is our team. How do we handle things like morale? How do we keep people motivated? The coaching staff has to change up, potential lineups. How do we think about that response? And the internal organization. And I think beyond just the players, injuries like this, they often can have a significant impact on even just like the credibility of the organization, the GM, the owner. If they don't do anything in this situation, will they be seen as lame ducks? If they do something immediately, will they be seen as rash or maybe making a decision too quickly? So just understanding that right away, this injury is going to impact every single stakeholder in the organization. The second piece that I want to think about is a little bit more like if this, then that, kind of the middle game response to this. And when I think game theoretically about this, I think to myself, okay, now that we figure out maybe a little bit around the injury, we figure out a little bit about options, how do we actually respond? Do we have to go out and get a new player to replace this person if we still are gung-ho on making the playoffs? What's the contract look like with our star player? Is this potentially something that could disrupt our long-term arrangement with this individual? And frankly, this doesn't just stop with ourselves. How are other teams going to respond to our responses? If we go out and get a big trade, is our rival going to do the same thing? And basically we have an arms race and they end up beating us because we're still missing our star player. So thinking about competitive response is important. And then, evaluating things like trade options, as tough as that might sound, sometimes an injured player is actually exactly the kind of person that you need to get rid of. And I think possible contract restructuring could also be on the table. So these options, I think, are really hard to think through immediately without more information, but that would be my second main bucket. The third is really just looking at those financials. And the reason I consider this a little bit more long-term is because while all these moving parts are happening, we're likely going to be, and I don't want to make any assumptions, but we're likely going to be losing attendance, and attendance and ticket sales are a huge piece of revenue for any sports team. So I would imagine that we're going to take a hit, and I would want to start working with whoever's on our staff to start modeling out those situations and see how severe that impact will be. We're also possibly going to lose just other residual things. If less people are showing up to the games, less people are going to be buying stuff at the games, foods, drinks, memorabilia, etc. And then there's this last piece just in terms of financials, which are we going to if we miss the playoffs, we're going to not be able to sell XYZ number of home games going forward. And that's just a giant chunk of cash that we are going to lose. So I think we need to get a handle on what do we do immediately? How do we think about competitive response? And then ultimately, how do we assess the financial downside of this? So I'll stop there.
Yeah, makes sense. I guess where would you even start? It sounds like there's a lot of unknowns. How are we?
A lot of unknowns. I would probably start with just how quickly can we get information on our player and what the injury outlook range is, and then from there thinking about, okay, how do we send this out to the media? How do we corral our team and get them to continue playing hard and feeling like they can compete? And then obviously syncing up with our GM and ownership on messaging.
Got it. Okay. I'm going to stop us there.
Mm-hmm.
How'd it feel, Ben?
I think, just speaking candidly, I think the sports world, and this is, guys, I think you're going to, are those applause for me? Wow, guys.
My amazing interviewing skills, duh.
Oh yeah.
I'm kidding.
Okay, it's tough. Okay, so I think it was okay. I question the nature of my buckets more than anything, because time is sort of, I use time as a benchmark, but I almost, like, as I was going through it, realized that like my buckets were really just like injury response, competitive response, and then financial impact.
Yeah.
So if I were to revise my own work, I'd probably label it that way.
Yeah. I love that.
My other thoughts are, oftentimes I try to get through my buckets as quickly as possible. I felt like I took a little long to do this. What did you think, Claire?
Totally. Yeah. And I think everyone feel free to chime in the chat, constructive, gas them up, whatever. But I think all of your reads were totally spot on with what I said. So just go through it. I think overall, your delivery is awesome. You are great at explaining what you say. You're really personable. If you took the case and you like internalized it and ingested it, and it was clear that you were thinking about a basketball team, not like any random case, right? Like you seemed like you were in it and you were with it, which was like so amazing. And so I thought the upfront made me really want to work with you immediately. I also thought that the buckets, especially as you started to go through them, each of the buckets had the same sub buckets each time. Like every single time, the sub buckets were exactly what you said: market, injury response, financial impact, and like other risks, right?
Mhm.
And so that was great. But to me, those could have been the up top buckets. So you have market, injury response, financial impact, other. And then you could think about them on the time horizon or think about like what that means now, later, then. But the same thing, it just lost a little bit of structure because it felt more of like a ramble.
Mhm.
Another up level you could have done was maybe keep your time buckets, but say, it's almost like you have your time buckets and then you have your buckets below them that is consistent across.
Mhm.
I think that was especially important because you took the time to clarify my goal. And my goal was 2 goals, right? The goal was make the postseason number 1. That is a number 1 thing. And 2, to articulate the financial impact. And so when you started to say what like the framework was, you did it. You were like, we have 2 goals. It's this and this. But then you started talking about like PR and HR and like things that weren't necessarily aligned to meeting and understanding those 2 goals right away.
Mhm.
Immediate response to that before I keep tearing in.
How do you think about, I almost felt a little counterintuitively, people think that like, if you've worked for so many years in healthcare, then if you get a healthcare case, you're going to crush it. I almost felt like I had almost all of the right details, but the buckets and the structure itself, maybe a 5 out of 10. I don't know. Like
it felt like you had spent more time literally thinking about the details. I think kind of on the assumptions point, like clearly, about basketball, right? About trades. You were talking about contracts. You were talking about all of these things. It almost took away from just showing a structured approach to like, we are solving a problem. Here is the way in which we're going to go about figuring out and understanding the problem. Because then at the end, you're like, there's a lot of unknowns. But what would have been more effective is identifying the unknowns that you needed and almost like prefacing how you're going to figure out the unknowns. So like talking about the injury response, the unknowns and how you want to go about it,
Mhm.
and then clearing that versus there's a fine line between showing you understand and are like in it and like going down rabbit holes of how much detail you're going to provide.
I completely agree. I felt there were at least 2 instances when I just went like, I double clicked just a little too much into something. And my intent was to explain my like logic beneath my logic, but that's almost too much.
Yeah.
And what I was getting at as well is like, I know sports, right? And that was actually, to me, probably a disadvantage because 700 considerations came into my brain in about 4 seconds. And what I think is a good thing for everyone to think about is why the framework that I almost felt like I was falling into at the end, and what the framework that Claire is suggesting, I think is a superior framework to the one that I came up with, is if you were to actually go about assigning teams of people to go out and do this stuff and get it done and actually like solve this case, because there are teams that right now they're dealing with exactly this. This is a thing. You wouldn't go assign a short term and a medium term and a long term team. You would go, maybe you have a crisis response, right? But that's going to be people in like, you might have an entire PR section. You might have an entire section that's just medical staff evaluating people. And then you have like your financial folks are going to come in and be like, oh God, like here's what's going to happen here. This could be a huge problem. Here's why. So what do you think about that?
That is such a good point, especially when you're thinking about it with those buckets, right? Your buckets, if we thought about each bucket being a team, you'd have had a rapid response team who is going through all of those things. You'd have a medium response team who's also still knocking those things, and they'd be duplicating work, which is kind of the idea of having a MECE framework, which I'm sure some people have heard, which is mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, which means that each bucket should focus on its own thing, should be able to be done as one team and in one bucket, but together they should all cover every part of what you need to solve. And so like what you were saying, when we're doing that, we were duplicating so much work. But if we had done the other buckets, you'd still get the same amount of things done, but it would be much more efficient. But I loved it. I want to keep us going, but also loving the chat. People are like synthesizing what we're saying better than we're saying it. And they're like really keeping it. So great work, chat. The last thing I'll say is when we think about it like a hypothesis, I don't want you to at the end say, my immediate thought is that he's going to be out for the season and we're going to lose $1 million, right? You have no information to do that. It's good though to start to ground yourself in back to the goals being, how do we get to the postseason? And like what's going to be the impact, it's nice to pull up and kind of show your prioritization skills and go, my immediate thought is it's really, really important to understand like the market or like to understand where we're sitting in the league. That's where I'd like to start. And I, as an interviewer, might go, nah, we're going to start at the financials. But showing that proactive thought process and showing that you like are working together to move the case forward versus me going, okay, so how do you want to go? It's really great. And it's just like a nice up level to show how tactful and tactical you are. Any other thoughts that you had? Anything you want feedback on, Ben?
No, but I like, I think it's Nabala's question in the chat. Can you go back and change a framework if you feel like there's a better way?
So this is one thing that people talk about in consulting. It's like you need to have like strong beliefs held loosely or something. So I want you to believe in your framework, right? There's no right framework as long as you're being logical and smart about it. My framework might be different than Ben's, but if Ben explains it well, it's okay. That being said, if more information comes or you get feedback that show that like you're able to change on the fly, it's okay to say, you know what, like these buckets are important, but what I'm really hearing is X, Y, Z, and just show how flexible you are, because that's what consultants are. We're getting new information and we're processing it. But at the same time, a lot of interviewers will just push back, right? I could have thought Ben's framework was 100% perfect. And I might go, why don't you think about it this way? And it's a really telling thing in your brain to decide, like, yeah, that's a really good point, but working under this framework, I think we'll be able to cover that. It's okay to keep your framework one way and to show I'm not a pushover and I'm not just going to like blow over when you say something new. But when you get information and you can real time implement it, also really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Let's keep rolling. Yeah.
Let's keep rolling. Okay, next one. And we're going to see that these cases are all a little different. So it'll be fun to see like how it shows up and how it's a little bit different. Okay, you ready?
Yeah, I'm not tired at all. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Right.
Our client is a zoo that's considering acquiring a famous zebra from an African preserve. It's a huge investment, but they believe the new zebra would be a great contribution to their animal community. You've been engaged to help decide whether this is a good idea. What would you consider when trying to help your client make this decision?
Interesting. Okay. So do you mind if I just ask what a famous zebra is as opposed to just a regular zebra?
You can ask, this is like a zebra that people come out to see. Like think Moodang, the hippo. This is a zebra that people want to know and people want to come see and would significantly probably drive people wanting to see it.
Okay, got it. And in terms of like us as a zoo, are we like the Bronx Zoo and like we're a flagship zoo, or we're just like a smaller new up and coming zoo?
Yeah, it's a major zoo within the US. We have a lot of daily visitors. We're strong. We actually don't have any other local zoos near us, so we're the only zoo there. We're not like the zoo in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And just one last thing. I'm more familiar with like businesses with products that are on shelves that make money. I'm guessing attendance is part of this as well in terms of how people earn, or, how a zoo earns money. Maybe it's also things like, actual specific special events, but I'm curious if that characterization sounds fair.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways that we do, but generally the like majority of our clients' revenue is through admission sales. So just tickets that what you buy, a daily person comes, buys one ticket, enters. We make some money on other parts of the business, like concessions, other things, but it's really that one ticket is where we make the most of our money.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and one last question. The reason I'm asking is, obviously we're thinking about all the ways that people spend their time, and a zoo is more of a special occasion, at least in my world. I'm curious if there's any other like major attractions or things that might be competing for people's time that are near us.
I think we don't actually have that information yet. So again, no other zoos in the local market, but we haven't done a deep dive on whether there are aquariums or amusement parks or anything else around.
Okay, this is interesting. Just to clarify, our main goal is just to decide, should we buy this zebra?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Do you mind if I take 2 minutes and wrap this up?
Go ahead. Okay, chat while he's working. Any questions, any thoughts? We've got 2 minutes to yap. Sounds like a BCG case. Be as charming as it was. No, it's totally valid. Again, these upfront questions are important, but like a lot of the questions you want to ask should be embedded in the framework, right? You don't need to know everything right away. So it might be something you want to actually like put into your framework. I use these upfront clarifying questions to one, understand the business. How do we make money? What's the main drivers? Like just get that background. Two, clarify goals. And then three, make sure you understand, right? Like if you've never seen a zebra before, you can be like, what is a zebra? Like how many zebras are in a zoo at any given time? But totally, you can pause, you can like absorb, you can do what you need. The general rule of thumb I do is I take like, do you mind? I take a second, like I'll hear the whole framework. I'll repeat it back and I'll say, let me just gather my thoughts. 15 seconds. Then I'll ask my clarifying questions. Then I'll say, mind if I take a second and write out my framework? And that's when you get the 1 to 2 minutes that he's taking right now. Oh yeah, if anyone wants to guess what their framework would be, feel free to drop it in the chat and then we'll see if you're better than Ben, which you probably are. With love. And Ben, you're running up on 2 minutes, so I might have to stop you right there and get you if you want to take 10 seconds left. Okay, 2 minutes, Ben.
All right. So I think there are a number of interesting ways to think about this, but holistically, as we think about whether or not we should buy a zebra, the way I've conceptualized this is just like the acquisition of any kind of prized asset. And so from an overarching perspective, I think that the guiding criteria can be around really the purchasing of this, of this rare animal and how it integrates with what we're already doing. So the buckets I have here, just to give the lay of the land, is really those purchase criteria, thinking about the revenues and the cost. The second bucket is going to be like thinking about like the actual market writ large, maybe competition. I'm thinking about maybe other possible purchasers, other zoos that might even be interested in this zebra. And then frankly, when we're thinking about the market, I also I want to understand what like is attendance actually going well? Do people have disposable income? Can they afford to go to zoos? If we buy this prized asset and nobody shows up, that obviously could be an issue. So I'm looking at the competition and the ways that people spend time and the ways that people allocate their disposable income. And then the third piece is I would say that the synergies. So when we think about the possible things that a zebra could offer, maybe it's a loan exhibit that they are actually that they're entertaining that they can put on. Maybe it's a special event. This is something that they have. The zebra itself has natural draw. That's great. But like, what if they could do like a safari style exhibit where they have a bunch of different animals and maybe it's a kid's ride or something like that. And they can go buy the zebra and a bunch of other things. And I think the last piece around this like synergistic component is, does this zebra, like, is this going to give us like a boost in attention and media? Are we going to be able to market this thing? What other benefits is this going to have to the zoo? Also happy to dive deeper into any of these categories, especially the natural cost structure and the revenue piece.
Yeah, talk more about it. Like, what do you mean? You said like cost structure.
Sure. Sure. So I mean, some of the stuff that I'm primarily thinking about is just like, first off, what's the purchase price? So if we're talking, this is a $1 million purchase, okay. If this is a $20 million purchase, okay. That could be substantial, and that could be one of our major investments in the P&L. And I believe in the prompt you mentioned that this would be massive. So what does our portfolio as a zoo look like from a financial perspective after we acquire this zoo? Are we overly concentrated? Or the zebra? Are we overly concentrated? Is this something that's even feasible? I think the other components of this that we need to think about are, like, when we purchase a new asset, like we might, need the exhibit, like we might need to hire staff, specialized people that are going to be brought over maybe from that African preserve, or maybe, we could use our local staff. That would save some money. But there's also just like maintenance, like when I think about feeding the zebra, or I think about just like taking care of it or making sure the facilities that it lives in are clean. All of these things are manpower, their cost. And I think they matter potentially over the long term. And this is where I think I would also love to just bring in some of the criteria that are not technically financial, but to understand even something like a payback period for the zebra. Let's say we hypothetically don't just like buy it all and it went cash lump sum. How old is this thing? And how long do they live? Because that's in the same way you might evaluate a house or you might evaluate any kind of property. This is going to be a key flagship asset for the zoo. And if it dies in 3 years, that's probably not, that's gonna put a linchpin in the actual deal. So
where
I'll
would you
stop
start? Where are we going to start?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'd want to understand is the purchase price of this zebra, because if it's listed at a number that's well beyond our financial capabilities, let's not even start. But if it's within the range, let's look at some options.
Totally. Okay, I'm going to cut us off there. I know we've been just having so much fun, so I want to give us time to get through the feedback and maybe leave a second to say goodbye. So I'll give a round of applause. Ben, thank you again for another amazing case. Great work. How'd it go?
Thanks.
What did you think about it?
First off, guys, thank you for bearing with me. We're shaking off some serious rust. I think the number one thing I wish I did was like do a double click into the most important category from the beginning, and I'm not sure why I didn't. I think I got a little bit lost in trying to like list out my overarching buckets first, and then I started double clicking, which I would say from an organizational communication perspective is not ideal. But I do think, Claire, when you pushed me on that, I felt I still had good ideas and I still had things that felt relevant.
Totally. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it probably landed well when I sort of situated things in an acquisition style framework. Yes. And then started to proceed and laid out to my categories. Maybe a bit of a hiccup on that first category, but I did feel like I had a little bit better of a grasp on this case than the last one. What do you think?
I agree completely. I think he's improving, you guys. The feedback's working. I think this is a really interesting case, right? Again, it's goofy. Like buying a zebra is weird, but literally whether you're buying a zebra or a company, which you kind of hinted at, it's still a similar type of thinking. And so this is actually a case where I do not want you to be memorizing. I do not want you to be it, but recognizing what types of cases this is like, even though it's a zebra, it's very similar to like an M&A style framework, which is why when you started to talk about it and like frame it with those kind of like specificities, it became clearer, it became more structured, and it made sense because it allowed you to get into like actual very important details, like how much is this going to cost us? Like, is this going to pay back? And the number one goal here, which is something that I think had you asked me a little more specifically, I would have steered you directly into it, was the only thing we cared about was profitability. Like number one was profitability. And so had, I think up front, you just really confirmed, because you were like, so it's just, do we want it or not? Had you been like, is there any single like most important thing? I would have actually been able to throw you a bone and give you a little more structure in the way you were doing it. But I totally agree. And I know we're like short on time, so I'll ramble some, chat, go off. But again, I think you did a really good job of like making it your own. I thought it was really like you were thinking about it, you did it. Again, I think you were right. Like when you started to framework, I love what we call signposting, which I think you did, but you started to signpost and then you fell off. Is like you said, there are going to be 3 things I want to look at, 1 and 2. And then you started clicking into them before you told me number 3. So I got a little lost, right? Ideally, what you would have said are there are 3 main things I want to look at: criteria, cost, the market, and then synergies. And then you go to speak a little bit more about that. And then if I zone out or I get a text from my boss while I'm interviewing you, I'm like, I literally wrote down those 3 things and I'd be like, we're on market. Like I can follow back up where he is. And that's why your boxes are so important. Another note I'll say is like, so you weren't necessarily doing the M&A framework, but we were talking about a zebra and you used the word synergies. And my brain was like, what? Like, I think it was like totally correct in what you were talking about, but I wish you had translated it into a term that made more sense for the moment. Right. So like, you were talking about like, what's the transition like? What are the opportunities? What are the things there? Maybe the word of like feasibility or transition planning or like additional metrics, like something else that felt a little more form-fitted than me just thinking you like remembered synergies from a past case and pulled it in, would have been really helpful in me like feeling very present as you gave me the case.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I like everything about your communication except for what you say. It's
yeah. So Claire, I think that I also think you're picking up on, if you guys are listening closely, like there are so many things that are tiny within cases. Like the fact that I didn't get precise on the prompt, like, is there a primary leading criteria for this purchase decision? Is like, it's like not asking, not asking about like, you're going, I just moved apartments. It's like not asking about rent or something, or like not making sure that like the rent is like my number one thing, like when someone's like selling me a property. So the guys, there's also just something else going on here that I want to add. Like we got in and you watched me do 2 cases, I would say neither of which were perfect. I think the second one was a marked improvement over the first one, but they're hard and they require practice. It's a skill set. Like, it's not like I just downloaded all the frameworks and all the cases and I just like know all of them in the back of my head. And because we worked there, right? Like that's actually not how it is. And I think if you were to take a lot of formers and just throw them back under the gun, like they might also experience a few of these things as well.
100%. And what was important was that even when it wasn't perfect, he had practiced enough. He's clearly confident enough that he was able to roll with the punches. He didn't do an exactly perfect framework, but he was able to present it well to me. He was clear about it. And those are things that just come with practice, with confidence building, and with this using this as a skill that you get better at. Every single framework is a new like puzzle or problem that you can tackle. And so the goal here is to really, really prepare yourself to do the practice, to do the work, to see enough cases so that when you get a random zebra case, you're not like starting from immediate scratch, but you have enough of a base layer that you can start to build on and add more and be unique, but consistent and well formatted and well presented. And it sounds like a lot, and I know this is a ton of feedback, but this is the way that we keep improving. And I promise you, my first like 10 cases were horrible. Like I was so bad. Like it's really, really a weird muscle that you have to build. And the best way to do it is to like, oh, I don't know where Ben went. The best way to do it, oh, there he is. The best way to do it is to like, you start up, you read, you watch, you do these things. But the best way to get it into your body, like we said earlier, is to just practice. And so find a case partner, go to your mirror, like watch videos, get a coach if you can. We are here to help. And it's like, as you can tell, I'm like buzzing. I'm going to go be so excited about case interviews the rest of the day. This is so fun. And it should be a fun process of like solving puzzles, making it work. That's how I would approach the framework. And that's how you should approach all case interviews.
Hey, Claire, I think we might want to jump to the end here too, because we've got 3 minutes and I can stay a few minutes over. I don't know if we're able to, but I also think, Claire, like this is, I hope you guys are seeing at least a little bit, like if Claire was my coach, this is what this would look like, right? Like she would be able to give such specific feedback. And actually, I think it was on like my bio page or whatever, but I actually have worked with previous McKinsey Bain people as well on casing to get back into it, to go do future jobs that also required it. So sometimes depending on how far along you are in the case process, we would focus on different things. You're probably seeing, right? Like I'm experienced at this, Claire's experienced at this. We're fine tuning a lot of elements, and sure, there were still even some parts that I feel like I could have done significantly better. But that process is just so important. It's the difference between being over the line and being like on the fence candidate, right? So getting all these little things right.
Totally. And I think it's just a process, and it's fun, and it should be fun. And where you can make it fun, make it a little game, make it exciting and a thing that you can improve on, that's the best mindset to have. And it should be an enjoyable process. It was probably 20% more fun for me. He's underestimating it. That being said, I know we're up on time. I can also stay. We might let's do a wrap up so everyone who wants to head out can head out. And then we're happy to stay and answer some questions in the chat for however long we can keep Ben here. I'm free. But if you had a great time or if either of these worked or you're thinking about coaching, like Leland is an amazing place. You're going to have you can go to a couple more sessions. We have 2 more today. They're going to be great places to get your questions answered. There will be more boot camps. There'll be more lessons. There are more things you can do, but a great place to start if you're feeling unsure is to either talk to a coach or talk to the Leland team to see what needs you have and how we can meet them. And so, but like the best thing you could do is what you did, which is you joined, you started, and you made progress to goal. And that's really important. So thank you guys for coming, and we'll stay on so you don't have to leave. But if you had a good time, you're going to be asked to leave a little review. I hate to plug this. If you give me a thumbs up and a 5-star, it would really help us give more of these out. But I had so much fun with you. Thank you all to people who stayed in the chat, stayed active. It was amazing. And thank you, Ben, for letting me beat you up a bit, but we'll stick around. Yes, reviews do mean more free stuff, but we'll stick around. We'll hang out for a bit, but thank you all. And if you're heading to the other events in the next few hours, have fun there. There's some amazing coaches waiting to help you out.
Awesome. Maybe we actually, Claire, I saw his hand go up. Maybe we start with Howie if he's still here. I think he raised his hand a few minutes ago for a question.
Okay. And then, yeah, people can stick around, people can head out, whatever's best for everyone.
Cool. Howie, jump off mute if it's helpful.
Oh, I might have to ask to speak. Or
yeah,
you can type.
I think he did. Oh, I got it. Okay. Hold on. I think I can do it.
I think I pressed it.
Nice. Okay. Howie, are we still there?
So
maybe we try Shelly if Howie's not around.
Yeah. Shelly.
Hello. So thank you so much. It was a great session. I learned so much by watching Ben go through the cases, and I found the experience really rewarding. So my quick question is, so I have a final round interview with BCG on May 30th.
Congrats.
I passed my first round. I'm wondering, based on your knowledge and experience, how is it different in second round versus first round? Or do I just do more of the same and just do it better?
I'd say like each step is a little bit more up levelly. The first rounds are actually like trying to gauge skill sets a lot. And then as you get further along, you're interviewing with people higher up in the company. And so a lot of that will also become more like stylistic, trying to get to know you, whether you're a fit for the company. But by making it through the first screen, you prove that you can like do a case and that you're smart and worth doing more. It's not going to like tangibly change, but think of it as it's probably going to get a little bit more like high level advanced. And then it's also going to get a little bit more like you want to start bringing more sparkle and more nuance into it if you can.
Yeah, you know, Claire, I use this on the event the other. Oh, sorry, Shelly, go ahead.
No, so basically, should I expect more like zebra questions and like basketball injury, like something creative, right? Or not?
Hard to say. I think, and like we can always talk more, but I just think of it as being ready for anything, right? Like you should be ready where they come in, because especially as it gets to the partner level, they kind of go off script sometimes. Like for the lower down levels, it's more standardized. But once you're talking to a partner, they can be like, I'm thinking about this today. Like, you know, and so like be ready for that. Be ready for the fun and be ready to be talking about, I think like one of my final rounds was about like a one part of a tire for like bikes, like, or motorcycles. So be ready for all. But I think still stands. And like, this is where I think you can add a little sparkle. Like when I'm talking about zebra, it's easy for me to be like, oh my God, I love zebras. Or, you know, when you talk to me about a specific part on a bike, it's also like, how can I become somebody who cares about that part of the bike? Like, how can I put myself into the shoes and being like, you know, I actually learned to ride a bike when I was in 3rd grade. I wouldn't say that, but like, you can like think about ways to like bring yourself in and be smart, competent, interesting, but also like distinctly you.
Shelly, I would say that second round as well, just to dovetail on everything that Claire was saying. First round is, can you do the job? Second round is, can we put you in front of a client? And so I'll give you a couple examples if it's helpful, Shelly. When I was in my McKinsey final round, the first guy that came in, we started our case and I gave my framework, right? I had 3 buckets and we talked through the last bucket was like something like a general considerations risks bucket. And I finished and I listed off like 3 or 4 things and he goes, I kind of like those. What else? And I listed like one more thing and he goes, what else? I did it again. And he goes, what else? He did this to me 4 times. And it was a perfect example of what I would call technically a stress test. But if you're approaching that with like a, interesting mindset, as opposed to like, oh shit, I ran out of ideas. Like that's that is what they are looking for. Are you the type of person that buckles when you are directly confronted or asked for more information or asked to make, give a take or do your best? Like I think the last time he asked, I was like, honestly, those are all of the good ideas that I can actually think of. But I hope this like exhaustive list was helpful or something like that. But
yeah, and also being like ready to roll with the punches. Like they might like, I think I also in my final round McKinsey interview, which is probably why I chose Bain, they like purposely were like, every single one of us who went in, they were like, they said no to our framework. They were like, no, I don't think those buckets make sense. Like every single one of us after were like, but it was my way of like rolling with it, being like, okay, if that's like, instead of being like, okay, I don't know what to do then, I was like, okay, that's super valid. Like, I still think it's important to look at profitability here. Is it okay if we start here? Like, I took it, I internalized it, I made my smile bigger, and I was like, I'm going to push. But that's practice, because the first few cases you were like stumbling. And so getting more comfortable, getting more like nuanced, it's like, that's how you push through a stress test, or that's how you push through. But yeah, I always think about it of like, always be able to say one or two more things off the cuff, always have a little bit of wriggle room. And that's why really understanding the problem before you dive in is going to help you, because if you don't get there and get your teeth in it, it's going to be really hard to think on your feet.
Yeah. When in doubt, yeah, Shelly, also like when in doubt, ask the question that like is like 30% possibly stupid and might look, make you look silly, right? Like that is so much better than going through the case with some assumption in your head that's actually possibly wrong.
Yes.
And them discovering that and needling you based on it. That's not what you want, right? So ask.
Totally. Amazing.
Okay, thank you so much.
You've got time.
Yeah, thank you.
Good luck too. Good luck on the interview.
Maybe we'll do one or two more and then let people have their time back.
Perfect. Okay. I think Ahmed's got his hand up. I don't know how what are we doing?
Yeah, hi guys. I had a quick question. This might be a little bit more nuanced, so I don't know if you guys can answer it, but I appreciate any advice. So about like later this month, towards the end of this month, I have one of those invite-only conferences coming up. It's for BCG specifically, so I just wanted to know if you guys have any advice on how to approach it, and then if like the interview process for like the summer associate roles look different when you're a part of these conferences, because I know like everyone going there gets a guaranteed first round interview and it'll be earlier than everyone else. So I just want to know like you guys just take on that if you have any advice.
Claire,
my first thought is also like go to the networking specific event or events that I think they're really helpful and they have focused sessions on this. My guiding criteria with this is be yourself. Just be a good person, show up, be interested in people, don't do things like take up too much of the airtime. And like, if you're in a circle of people, everyone's giving their backgrounds, be straightforward, be brief, I think be thoughtful, all that stuff. So those are my first thoughts.
Yeah. And I think my rule of thumb, which I love to tell all my clients and everyone who will listen, is my goal is at any of these things is just don't be that guy. Like and it's like, you don't have to be the number one person. You don't have to do all these things. The worst case scenario, and we have it, it's kind of what we call the airport test too. It's like, you just don't want to disqualify yourself by being abrasive, mean, like putting yourself over others. Show that you're a team player right away. Show that you're like inquisitive. Show that you're interested. Talk to the other participants. Talk to the person checking you in. Be kind throughout the process. In terms of the interviews, like they want quality no matter the quality. So yes, you're going to get an automatic first round. They are not going to treat you any differently because of that. Once you get into it, like frequently even like the interviewers might not know that you're part of a thing that gave you this first round. So you just need to come in ready to rip, ready to be the best version of yourself. It's awesome. Like it's sick to get that first round right away and like know you have that. So all you can do now is like crush it there, but crush it as you prep, because you know it's coming. And so just be as ready as physically possible.
I think Grace, maybe we'll do one more.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me? Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, go for
great. Thank you so much for the presentation. I really learned a lot today. This is my first time like joining a case interview prep. So thanks a lot like Ben and Claire. So I do have an interview with Deloitte coming up next week. So I would like to know like how different Bain and BCG is kind of different from Deloitte, and then what should be my strategy like from now till the weekend so that I can prep as much as possible, since I do have like that interview, like the case plus situational questions as well. So yeah,
Totally.
thank you.
So amazing. Again, congratulations. I cannot wait to hear all the people who attended our workshop that are landing jobs within a week of this. But no, so truly, I think every single firm has a different perspective. The best way to learn about what that perspective is on their website, talking to the, like anyone you know there, or the recruiters, talking to a coach who has like information on it, and figuring out what the specific nuances are. That being said, the core fundamentals of frameworks of structured thinking are consistent. There's going to be stylistic differences. There's going to be specific things that they test for. The best places to look, again, are through the company directly. Case books, if you ever Google those, will usually have sheets on what a specific like company looks for. So like any case book, whether you look up any business school and look up case book after it, and you're going to be able to see like a sheet of, these are typical types of questions that Deloitte will ask. This is how Deloitte does their interviews. So that's the one I would say. In terms of like short timeline prepping, which I am very used to, I had that on my end. This is where quality mixed with quantity is going to be your best friend, and where drills, like Ben talked about earlier, are going to save you, because individual cases are going to take you a long time. What you want to do here is make sure that you're prepping. You need to start, again, out loud, going through cases, doing them. Then you need to be reflective. I take almost as much time as you saw giving feedback as I do running a case, because that's the best way to get those fine-tuning details, especially on a short fuse. And then the last thing I'll say before I'm sure Ben has some great advice is I will run a case. I will then either, if you're alone, you'll read through the like answer key, or if you are with somebody, they'll give you the feedback. I sit it down. I take a million notes. I sit it down for an hour, 2 hours, if you're on a short fuse. And then I come back and I redo the case literally perfectly. I say it out loud and I redo, or like, let's say you crush the math, fine, leave it. But let's say you mess up the framework. I redo the framework exactly as I would have done it, so that I get it into my body and that you actually like have that embedded and that you get that muscle memory. Ben?
Honestly, I think that your approach is great. It's much more nuanced and detailed than mine, which was going to be just try to get some live cases in. Given your tight timeline, I would say just like make sure that each time you sit down and do a case, you're prepared to like do it, or whatever component of the case, do it. Quality reps. Don't be rushing. Don't try to read 17 cases in a row. 2 good cases is better than 10 shallow cases. So just remember that just quality in general is your guide.
Totally. Okay. Unfortunately, I think that is all the time we have, but it has been so much fun. Thank you all who are here silently, people who are in the chat, people out loud. I had literally a blast. You know where to find us. We're on Leland, and really recommend going to some of the other Consulting Week stuff. It's really, really helpful.
Awesome. Great to meet everybody.
Thank you
Enjoy
so
the night,
much.
y'all.